So, what I want to do is talk about buying this car and how you found it, and the work you were doing on the car, and up until the point where you disassembled it. Because then in my other video, I talk about the part that I knew, which was, it was disassembled my whole life. And, up until, I remember before we moved to Georgia, I played around with the engine and it was locked up. And then after we moved to Georgia, second house actually, that I think maybe Eddie helped me get it, like towing it around the field or something to get it unlocked, because I could never find the crank for it either. That made it more difficult. But we finally got it unlocked and eventually got it running. But kind of that time period between, where you went and found it and when I started on it, So,
mentioned that you couldn't find the crank, and I'll tell you where the crank is.
Okay. So, let me introduce. This is my dad, and he bought this car. And if you watch some of the earlier videos, you could tell that I didn't really know a lot on the history of it, and I just told. I think it's in video 1 or 2 early on in this project. I talked a little bit that I knew about it, but I wanted to get it from my dad, how he found the car and the work he was doing on it. So you grew up in Massachusetts and you were wheeler dealer. You had done other cars before this one.
Yeah.
And this was like when you were 15, you bought this one, but you were wheeler dealer before 15 with some previous cars. What was like the first car that you ever bought?
Okay, the first car was a 1935 Ford flathead V8. That becomes important there in a minute. And paid $10 for it. It was it had been modified somewhat. Somebody had taken an axe and chopped the body off it, so it was just a chassis with the seats. And
what year is this? Because it's an old car at that point.
Okay, this was can't tell you exactly, but I'm thinking about probably 1953, and I would have been 13.
So it was like almost a 20-year-old car at that time. So they just hacked the roof. It was
right. It was just so that was the very first one, and I ran it around. I had a friend of mine whose brother had some Model A's, his older brother, and but he really wanted a flathead V8. He was
hot rod.
He was probably 15 or 16. I mean, he wasn't all that old, but he wanted some hot shot engine.
Yeah.
And he saw that V8, and it had aluminum heads on it. Not that made any difference then. And to make a long story short, we traded, and he had a 1930 four-door. No, it was a 31, I believe it was.
Model A?
Model A.
Uh-huh.
So we traded, and I never really did a lot with that second car, 31, and one of the reasons is my cousin's husband, a guy named Pete Poirier. Pete was a real nice guy, and Pete knew mechanics and everything. He had heavy equipment and so forth. Pete was one of the finest people I'd known from back then. he wanted a Model A. And he wanted to make a cut-down tractor out of it.
So he didn't care that it was a four-door. He was not...
Yeah, and he just really, he said, get this, now I have $10 involved, invested so far. He said he'd give me $50 for it.
And you're,
I didn't ask him.
13 years old or something, so this was a big profit.
Yeah, and so here I am. I don't spend a nickel. We had a business that had a restaurant, a gas station, and a liquor store. Well, the gas station took care of my gasoline requirements.
Your parents' gasoline?
So I really wasn't spending any money to speak of. Everything that I could get. And one of the areas that I was making money, as we're seeing here, is, I make $40 on this
that transaction
right there.
Yeah.
And that's big dollars when you're 13 in 1953. That gave me enough money with the small jobs that I had been doing. I actually had probably a little bit more than $50. And a fellow that my dad knew, he carpooled with. Mm-hmm. He had a 1940 Ford Deluxe two-door, and he was upgrading to a 1946 Ford because they were traveling about 50 miles a day each way.
Carpooling.
He got to 46 and he sold me the 1940 Ford for $50.
Those are those slope back, right?
It was like a fastback, you could say. And the 40 Deluxe had more front grille on it, louvers in the front.
Deluxe, more chrome.
Reason I know that is because I got a 40 Ford Standard later. But so we're getting into the money. The 40 Ford,
you're still underage, so you can't really drive it legally.
I'm sorry?
You're underage, so you can't really drive it legally.
We're underage and can't drive? Oh, I didn't realize that at the time.
Well, Western Massachusetts, you're not worried about law.
We had a constable in a town of 600 people back in the hills and the woods and whatnot. Nice, quiet town. And the constable was a very practical individual. If you didn't cause trouble, he didn't bother to, get involved. He wasn't going to stir things up.
So you had your version of Andy Griffith.
Yeah. So, and that helped me because at 14, I started driving farm trucks. These are what I call a 2-ton flatbed dumps and whatnot. And what I was doing really was handling hay, driving a tractor. I'd rake the hay, and never really, they wouldn't allow a kid like me to drive the baler. That was a little bit above my level in life. So occasionally they'd let me look at it or touch it.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a lot of money too, I guess.
It's a lot of money then on that, yeah. But I was getting paid then. I really getting into money now. I'm making 50 cents an hour. And learning to drive trucks, these had 4 on the floor with a 2-speed rear end. And the 2-speed rear end is something that you have to, you don't just step in and do it. You have to learn how to do it. And they can be real tricky to make the two of them shift. And especially the vacuum operated ones, because they weren't as strong as the electric ones. Anyways, I got pretty good with the trucks, so that by the time I was 16, I could drive the trucks legally.
Yeah.
Well, not really. Now, we lived near in western Massachusetts near the New York line, and we did haying in New York State. One day I was on, I think I had our newest truck, which was a Dodge, 2-ton Dodge truck, and I'm driving towards the hayfield. I see a blue light behind me. I said, oh, no. New York trooper. I got the empty truck. I'm heading to pick up some hay in the field. He stops me, and the guy I worked for, they milked 120 cows, but they also had a dairy, and they did ice cream as well as dairy products. The trooper stops me, and he says, model dairy, this doesn't look like a dairy truck. And I explained to him, So he was one of these, I think, that, like the Maytag man, he needed something to do. And he had a kid here, so he knew he could, push me around a little bit or whatever. And he said, you're driving this truck illegally. I said, oh, I didn't realize that. I said, I have my license here. He said, that license is no good in New York State.
Yours is a Massachusetts license.
It was a Massachusetts license, which allowed me to drive any size truck at that time.
Uh-huh.
In New York, you had to have, get this, a chauffeur's license to drive a truck. I never did understand that. And so
before CDL,
he said, park the truck over there off the road, and I did. And he said, no, get in the back, where they have it screened in for bad people like me. Takes me down to the courthouse, which happened to be the justice of the peace, and he does court on his front porch.
Uh-huh.
So he hauls me in there and explains to the justice of the peace, and the justice of the peace thought, this guy really ought to be doing something more important than harassing a kid like this.
Yeah, why waste his time too?
He didn't say that then, but turns out that justice of the peace / judge is a friend of the owner of the farm where I work. So I got the inside skinny afterwards, and he said, well, you were driving this truck, it's against the law, we got to do something. He said, $10 fine. I said, well, Your Honor, I said, I don't have any money on me. Oh, I know, it's been many years now, I've forgotten a little detail. I didn't park the truck. He told me to follow him, so I had followed him down there. This becomes important because I don't have any money. He tells me, just leave the truck here for collateral. And I said, okay. I asked the trooper, I said, can you take me back to where you arrested me? No, I got important things to do. I can't be messing with you, I said it was about 3 or 4 miles, maybe a little bit more. I had to walk all the way back there, and then it was maybe another half mile to where the field was. Got there, explained everything to him, and the boss, a Jewish guy named Morris Stoshkins, he said, what's the matter with that man? I said, I'm sorry, Morris. I said, I didn't realize that, I was an outlaw. So after that in New York State, I had to work in the fields, and somebody else would have to drive the
in New York
truck over the road.
Yeah.
And I rode back one day on top of these. We put 120 bales on these trucks, and they were high. We're driving back, and another guy and myself right on top of the hay. And he He said, "Hey, we're back in Massachusetts. There's a railroad bridge coming up." I said, "We don't know how much clearance there is." The other guy said, "We better do something about it." So we had two ropes going over the load. He got on one, I got on the other. People are behind us watching, and it's just we had to get down below the level. And I don't know how much clearance, but we watched, we went by, and it seemed like it was that close. Probably was, might have been enough, or it might have been enough to spatter us all over the bridge.
Yeah.
It's funny how, the two of us could have died right then.
Yeah.
Just
the driver could have kept going.
Just over something stupid, And, many times after that, things would happen to make me wonder, in Vietnam, but you can see here that, I was getting...
working farm jobs, making money.
I'm working on the farm full time. I work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and it was paying me good. But I'm making $35 a week now.
In the early 50s,
but it
for an underage kid.
It adds up.
Mm-hmm.
And
so, how did you find out about this car?
Okay, we'll get to that right now, and that is that I saw the ad in the newspaper. It was, I believe, $150, which was a lot of money for a Model A in those days because,
it would have been 26 years old. This would have been a 26-year-old car that nobody really wanted in the 50s.
Well, nobody. Well, most people didn't want a Model A. They wanted to get something modern. That was just an old car, and no prestige to it. So I got it, but to put it into context, I had been wheeling and dealing. I had gotten another 40 Ford we picked blueberries. We found a blueberry patch that nobody seemed to be taking care of, so we took care of it. And we picked blueberries by the bucketful. We ended up making $30 selling blueberries. Bought this 40 Ford Standard, but it had a 100-horse Mercury engine in it. The head was marked 59AB or something like that, but it was a going machine. There was a couple things wrong with it. The seat wasn't bolted down in the front, and the shift has a piece of pipe stuck in where the shift stick had broken off. Kind of a little bit difficult to handle. We took off in that thing, a buddy of mine and I. He popped the clutch on that thing. We ended up in the back seat.
Yeah.
And said, well, we got to do something about that. But
so it is like a 15-year-old car, so some people may still want the engine, some parts off of it.
Yeah, the engine was really worth more than the car. And, we made some money there. I never regrets, put it that way. I'd always make some money. Sometimes I'd make good money, sometimes I'd make a little bit. And I always worked. When I worked on the farm, 12 hours a day, 6 days a week, and on Sunday I'd work at the Amico garage, which was also the Chevy garage. And when I wasn't pumping gas the way we did in those days, I would be either they had new sports cars coming in from overseas and they had gunk all over the chrome.
Oh, yeah.
So I had to take that gunk off, which was labor intensive.
As they shipped it over.
They would ship them over on the ship, usually on a deck. Anyways, that was...
So you're working in the garage and making money
That
there.
was in 1957. I was doing 57 Chevys, which, as you know, I got back into a few years later.
Yeah. When we moved to Georgia, we started in the Chevys.
But I had $150 within, and maybe a bit more.
And I guess at this, you're like getting into high school range where you want a legal car to drive to high school. So you wanted something that's complete, a little more dependable. And even this was, what is it, 26 years old at the time, but you could afford it.
I was continuing to do, you know, if a person wants to work and wants to build up some money, you know, they can do it. Even back then, it wasn't a lot, but it was money.
Thanks for watching, and click subscribe to see more videos, and click the like button, and these will pop up on your feed. But thanks everybody, take care. Okay.